The boiler started making sounds no one could explain. It was October 1973 at Jefferson Middle School in upstate New York. The leaves outside had turned to copper and rust. But beneath the cafeteria, deep in the basement where no student was allowed, something had begun to groan. At first, it was dismissed as old pipes and settling concrete. But the janitor, Hank Russell, who had worked there since the 50s, said he had never heard anything like it. The noises came late in the afternoon, slow metallic creaks, almost like chains being dragged. Then silence. Then the unmistakable sound of breathing. Not mechanical, human. On November 8th, 2 boys slipped away from detention. Adam Hargrove, 14, Malek Jensen, 13. They had a plan. Smoke a stolen cigarette in the one place no teacher ever went, the locked hallway behind the furnace room. But when they pushed open the service door, something had changed. At the far end of the corridor, behind dust and pipes and years of forgotten trash, there was a locker no one remembered. Number 119. It was sealed shut, padlocked, wrapped in chains that had rusted to the frame. On the ground in front of it, just one item. A red leather shoe, small, scuffed, a name faded on the heel, L. Carter. Malik wanted to leave. But Adam, always curious, had brought a camera. A handheld film reel he had borrowed from the school's AV room 2 weeks prior. He thought this was perfect. A ghost story. A mystery. Something cool to show on Monday. He hit record. Only Malik came back upstairs. He was barefoot. His shirt was torn at the collar. His lips were pale. He didn't speak until a teacher wrapped him in a blanket and called the nurse. When asked what happened, he said only this. Adam heard someone whisper his name from inside the locker. He thought it was a prank. He laughed. He said he'd open it. He pulled the lock. The chains fell off like they wanted him in. And when the door opened, he screamed. I ran, but the door closed behind me. I swear I didn't touch it. No one found Adam Hargrove. Police assumed he ran away, but the locker was resealed when they arrived, tighter than before. And the shoe? It belonged to Linda Carter, a girl who vanished from the school in 1962. 50 years later, in the spring of 2023, the school was being converted into a community center. Construction crews cleared the basement for the first time in decades. They found the locker still there, sealed shut, and next to it, buried beneath rotted wood and broken desks, a small tin box. Inside was a reel of film, untouched, unlabeled, except for 3 words written in black ink. Watch alone. The tape was still warm. There was no logical reason for the reel to be warm. It had been sitting in a sealed box for decades, buried under layers of dust, mildew, and debris. Yet when the construction worker pulled it from the tin, he dropped it with a curse. It was hot to the touch. Not scalding, but unnaturally warm, like it had just been used. Dan Morales, site supervisor, picked it up next. He held it longer. Felt a slight vibration in his fingers, like static. It buzzed for a moment, then went still. The box had no label aside from the words "Watch Alone," written in trembling, all-caps handwriting on the inside lid. Black ink, slightly smeared. Dan wasn't superstitious, but something about that basement bothered him. The air was heavy, thick with mold, and something metallic. Something he tasted at the back of his throat. He radioed his team to take an early lunch and told his assistant to bring the old AV equipment upstairs. An hour later, the film projector was set up in one of the empty classrooms on the 2nd floor. The windows were boarded during renovations, so the light was low. Dust floated in the beams like ash. Dan loaded the reel. The first frame was blank, then static, then ... color. A hallway, dimly lit, the same basement corridor from earlier that morning. But the camera was moving, shaky. Breathing was audible, raspy, too close to the microphone. Then a voice, barely above a whisper. "Are you getting this?" Adam Hargrove. His voice unmistakable. From 1973, Dan froze. His stomach dropped. On screen, Adam rounded the corner. The chains came into view. So did the locker. Exactly as it looked now. Locked, sealed, cold. But the shoe was gone. "Malik, come on. This is crazy," Adam whispered. There was no response. Just a slight shuffle behind the camera. Then something happened. The image flickered. For less than a second, the frame distorted, as if the film had been spliced. And in that frame, just one, the locker door was wide open. Empty inside, but not entirely. Dan rewound the film, froze it on that flicker, studied the still, and his blood ran cold. There was something inside the locker, not a person, not a shape, an eye, just one, human, wide open, staring directly into the lens. Dan backed away from the projector. Then he heard it. A soft sound coming from the classroom door behind him. The unmistakable click of a padlock. Being latched shut from the outside. The basement wasn't finished. Dan lunged for the door, twisting the knob hard. It rattled, but didn't budge. He pulled again, locked from the outside. His walkie-talkie crackled on the desk. Static, then silence. No signal. He turned back toward the projector, heart racing. The reel was still spinning, now on a black screen. The clicking of the film tail flapping echoed like a ticking clock. Dan yanked the power cord, and the room fell into complete silence. No sound, no movement. Then the lights flickered. For a moment, the room flashed bright white. And in that split-second burst, Dan saw something standing near the chalkboard. A silhouette, thin, slouched, facing the wall. When the lights stabilized, it was gone. Dan stumbled backward into a desk, knocking over a chair. He wasn't imagining things. Something was wrong with the film, and maybe with the school. He tried the windows, but they were still boarded. Heavy plywood nailed shut from outside. It didn't make sense. The construction crew hadn't even started gutting this wing yet. Then the projector clicked again, even unplugged. Dan stared at it. The reel wasn't moving, but the lens glowed faintly. A pale, greenish hue. He stepped closer. Inside the lens, faintly distorted, was the locker. Number 119. Only now it was open, completely, and something was crawling out of it. Dan stepped back, fast, but nothing emerged in the room. Only the image inside the lens twisted forward, frame by frame, as if something on the other side of the glass was trying to break through. Then another sound, a scraping, from the vent in the corner of the room. He turned, held his breath. It was coming from the duct, just above the blackboard. Slow metal scraping, like fingernails on steel, and a whisper. Danny ... double quotes, his childhood nickname. No one had called him that in 40 years. He stepped toward the vent, heart hammering. Another whisper. Still watching? Suddenly, the floor beneath him shook. Just once, sharp and sudden. Enough to knock the reel off the table. Dan bolted for the door again and began pounding. "Hey, anyone out there? Open up?" No answer. Then ... a faint reply. But not from the hallway, from the vent. A child's voice. "Don't open it again, ... double quotes." Dan froze. Then he remembered the box the reel had come in. He reached for it, flipping it over, examining every inch. Inside, tucked beneath a false layer of tin, was something he hadn't noticed. A second film reel. Smaller. No writing. Just a red sticker with a hand-drawn circle. He stared at it, feeling cold rush down his back. He didn't know why, but he understood something in that moment. The first tape was a warning. The second ... was a key. The second reel showed a girl no one recognized. Don debated whether to even touch the second reel. His palms were sweating. The classroom felt colder now. Not from the weather. It was a heaviness in the air, like the atmosphere was pressing down. But something in his gut told him not watching. It would be worse than pressing play. So he loaded the reel into the projector. It clicked into place with a sound that felt too deliberate, like it was waiting. The lens sparked back to life, humming faintly. The screen lit up. This time, it wasn't the basement. It was a hallway, brighter, painted a faded yellow, the kind of color used in schools to look cheerful, but always felt sickly under fluorescent lights. The camera was still shaky, handheld. Someone was walking, breathing hard, like they were nervous. Then the camera stopped. It focused on a girl sitting alone at the end of the hallway. She couldn't have been older than 12. Pale skin, dark hair in braided pigtails, a green cardigan. Her legs dangled off a wooden bench. She was staring straight ahead, not blinking. The camera zoomed in, and she turned her head. Her eyes didn't look afraid. They looked sad. And then she spoke, but not to the person filming. To Dan. "You shouldn't have watched the first one." Dan staggered back, knocking into the desk behind him. The girl on the screen stood slowly. Behind her, lockers lined the walls, newer than the ones in the basement, but dented, aged. Dan realized something strange. The film looked too crisp, the color too sharp. This wasn't from 1973. This wasn't old at all. This was recent. The girl walked toward the camera. Her steps were measured, heavy, almost like she was fighting the floor. As she walked, the hallway lights behind her began to flicker and die, one by one, darkness creeping forward with each step. Then the camera panned left, quickly, as if the person filming had been startled. The image blurred, and when it came back into focus, the hallway was empty. The girl was gone. Dan paused the film. His breath came in sharp gasps. He reached for the phone on the teacher's desk. No signal, no dial tone, nothing. He turned back to the projector. The girl was back, but now she was sitting at a student desk. The room was identical to the one Dan was in. Same blackboard, same posters peeling at the corners. She was facing away from the camera, hair draped over her shoulders. Then she whispered something, so softly that Dan had to step closer. He turned the volume knob, and that's when she looked over her shoulder, directly into the camera, into Dan, and said, "You brought it upstairs." The projector died. Lights off, room silent. Then a low creak echoed from behind him. He turned slowly. The classroom closet door was open now. He hadn't touched it. Her name wasn't in any school records. Dan stood frozen, staring at the open closet door. The darkness inside, it wasn't just shadow. It looked deeper than the room itself, like a tunnel carved into the wall behind the drywall. Cold air leaked out, carrying the scent of wet stone and something older, something buried. He backed away and grabbed the flashlight from his construction belt. The beam flickered as he pointed it into the closet. No tools, no shelves. Just empty space leading back into what looked like an unfinished section of wall. He took a cautious step forward, shining the light inside. The beam caught something metallic, a plaque. It was bolted to the cement, worn but still legible. Room 3B, reserved storage to 1973. Dan frowned. There was no room 3B listed on any of the renovation maps. This wing only had rooms labeled numerically by floor, and room 3B would have been ... here. Exactly here. But it wasn't a room. It was a void, hidden, sealed. He snapped a photo and returned to his laptop, searching the old blueprints the district had provided. Nothing. He checked faculty rosters from the 70s, then student records. That's when he saw it. A single sheet, scanned from a handwritten ledger. Faint cursive, smudged ink. It listed disciplinary incidents for April 1973. One name repeated 3 times. Gwen Ralston. Age, 12. Incident, wandering off campus. Date, April 3rd. Note, found in boiler hallway, unresponsive. Same girl. Dan was sure of it. Second incident, April 10th. Same note. Third incident, April 18th. Last entry, missing. Locker 119 sealed. Dan's hands shook as he read it again. He searched for her enrollment. Nothing. No class photo. No address. No guardianship file. She had been written into the incident log, but didn't exist anywhere else. Like she was enrolled for 1 month and then erased. Quietly. Deliberately. Then another folder caught his eye. Scanned teacher memos from 1973. He clicked through. One stood out. It was a letter from a substitute teacher, assigned briefly in April. The handwriting was rushed, erratic. To whom it may concern, I request to be removed from the assignment immediately. There is something deeply wrong in this building. The children talk about her like she's still here. They leave one shoe outside locker 119 every Friday. They say it keeps the door shut. I don't know what that means, but I saw her. She asked me if I was alone. She smiled. Then the film in the AV room unspooled itself. Dan closed the file. His flashlight flickered again. From the hallway, he heard footsteps, soft, barefoot. Then the sound of a locker door creaking open. Not from the basement, from right outside the classroom. He stepped toward the window, trying to see through the crack in the boarded panel. That's when he saw the girl, standing motionless in the hallway. Same cardigan, same braids. But now she was holding something. A single shoe. She lifted it and placed it quietly against the base of the door. Then whispered, "This is the last time I'll help you." The closet led to a room that wasn't on the map. Dan knew he should walk away. Call someone. Leave the school and pretend none of this had happened. But some invisible thread pulled him toward the closet. Something older than fear. Older than logic. It felt like he had been chosen, and whatever was behind that dark space had been waiting decades for someone to open it again. He stepped inside. The beam from his flashlight cut through layers of dust. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew and rust. As he passed the metal plaque, his boot hit something hollow. The floor beneath him shifted. Not a wall at all, but a door. A trapdoor recessed into the foundation, covered in decades of grime. He knelt and wiped away the dirt. No handle, just a small indentation, like it was meant to be pried open by hand. Dan hesitated. Then he dug his fingers into the groove and pulled. The hatch creaked open with a groan that echoed through the walls. A staircase descended into pure blackness. Not a single wire for light. Just stone steps leading down, like a bunker carved into the earth beneath the school. He took one breath and stepped down. Each footfall echoed like it was being swallowed by the dark. The staircase spiraled. The air grew colder, damp. The walls were lined with stone blocks, some marked with what looked like chalk symbols, circles, eyes, numbers. He lost count of how many steps he took. But eventually he reached a door, steel, industrial, painted red, though the color had faded to a dull brown. Etched into the center was a number, 119, the same number as the sealed locker. Dan pressed his hand against the door. It was cold to the touch. Then it clicked. Not a lock, a mechanism. The door drifted open an inch. He pushed it slowly. The room on the other side wasn't what he expected. It wasn't a storage area. It was a replica of a classroom. Desk rows, chalkboard, even a world map pinned to the far wall. But everything was slightly off. The desks were too small. The posters were faded copies of ones from upstairs, but written in Latin. The map had no country names, just blank outlines. And in the center of the front row sat the same girl, Gwen, still watching him. But something about her was different now. Older, somehow, not in age, but in weight. Her presence filled the room like fog. Dan opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a finger to her lips. Silence. Then she pointed to the corner, where an old television sat on a wheeled cart, the kind used in schools for VHS tapes. Next to it was a single tape, labeled in red ink, "Show them what you found." Dan reached for the tape, and in that moment, Gwen stood and whispered, "If you play it, they'll remember." He asked, "Remember what?" She turned her head slowly toward the ceiling and said that I was real. Then everything in the room went black. The door behind him slammed shut, and the television turned itself on. The tape showed a class that never existed. The screen blinked to life, glowing faintly in the darkness. Dan stumbled back, nearly tripping over a desk, as the static resolved into a shaky handheld shot of the very room he was standing in. But it wasn't empty. It was full of children. 12 of them, all seated in the same formation as the desks around him. None of them spoke. Their faces were pale, eyes fixed forward, unblinking. The camera panned slowly, deliberately, as if someone wanted to document every face. Gwen was there, in the front row, staring directly into the lens. The time stamp in the corner read April 19th, 1973. 7:23 a.m. The image trembled slightly, not from the person holding the camera, but as if the room itself was vibrating. The lights on the screen flickered. One by one, the students turned their heads in perfect unison toward the left side of the room. The camera followed. A door creaked open on screen. No one entered, but the students stood, together, moved their desks aside, and walked toward the darkness at the back of the room. Every single one of them vanished into the shadow, and then the camera cut out. Just static. Dan's heart pounded. He ejected the tape with trembling fingers. As he did, a new sound broke the silence. A knock. 3 soft knocks. From the inside of one of the lockers behind him. He turned, realizing the back wall of this room wasn't a wall at all. It was lined with ancient metal lockers, rusted but intact, and one of them was rattling. He approached slowly. It was labeled 120, the number after Gwen's. The door clicked, opened slightly on its own. Dan raised his flashlight and pulled it open. Inside was another tape, this one unlabeled. He stared at it. The silence returned, but now he noticed something else. The desks in the room were no longer empty. Faint outlines, shadows, shapes seated just beyond the reach of light, watching, waiting. Dan backed toward the door. He tried to open it, locked. He inserted the second tape. This one started immediately. No static, just a shot of the hallway, the basement hallway above. Only now it was filled with shoes. Dozens, hundreds, all lined up in pairs, all small, children's shoes. Each one with a name tag attached. Gwen, Amira, Thomas, Julian. Names that didn't appear in any of the school's records. Dan's breath caught. The camera turned again, now facing the entrance of the basement, where a new pair of shoes had just been placed. Boots, his, and the tape ended, and the power went out. There was a pattern in the shoe sizes. Dan stood frozen in front of the old CRT monitor. The image of the hallway burned into his eyes. The shoes were not just scattered. They were organized, neatly lined up, grouped by type, by condition, by size. There was a terrifying order to the chaos. He knelt beside the screen, rewinding the tape frame by frame. The camera had paused on each pair of shoes just long enough to let something sink in. Names, tags, identical formatting, as if someone had deliberately labeled them to be found. And then something clicked. Every shoe was the left foot only. No right shoes. He scanned his surroundings. Desks, chairs, that cold air returning. Dan scribbled each name he remembered into his notebook. Gwen, Amira, Thomas, Julian. Then he replayed the hallway sequence again, this time counting the shoes. 12, then a gap, then 2 more, then 1 more. 15 total. The same number of desks in the room. The same number of shadows he thought he saw. The locker creaked behind him. Dan turned sharply, flashlight shaking. Inside locker 120, something had changed. The tape was gone. In its place was a small notepad. Old, torn, faded red. Inside, a list. Each page had a name, a measurement, and a single date. Gwen Rossner. Size 6. April 19th, 1973. Thomas Keys. Size 7. April 19th, 1973. Amira Fallon. Size 5. April 19th, 1973. Dan flipped forward. Julian Everett. Size 6. April 19th, 1973. All matching the same morning. Then he saw his own name. Dan Riggins. Size 11. Today's date. It hadn't been written in pen. It was embossed, pressed into the paper. He dropped the notepad. Footsteps echoed behind him. Soft, deliberate. He spun around. Empty. But the shoes in the hallway? They were no longer on the tape. They were now in the actual hallway above. He didn't know how, but they were there, and his pair had joined them. The fire drill that was never logged. Dan raced up the spiraling staircase, flashlight beam dancing over the stone walls. The silence pressed down on him like weight. When he finally reached the trap door, it opened with ease, too easily, like it had never been sealed, like it wanted him to return. He emerged into the janitor's closet, lungs burning. The school above was still and dim, lit only by faint emergency lights blinking near the exits. He stepped into the hallway and stopped cold. The building wasn't empty. A loud, low alarm rang once. Not the standard shrill fire drill tone he remembered from childhood. This was deeper, slower, like it had been pulled from an old war film. Flashing red lights strobed along the ceiling, but no one was moving. No teachers, no students, just that sound. Dan jogged the main hallway, expecting to find chaos. Instead, he saw a perfect line of children standing at attention near the walls. Each faced forward, silent, unmoving, like statues. And every single one of them was barefoot. Their shoes were gone. Dan whispered, "Fire drill?" No response. He approached a student, tapped his shoulder. The boy blinked once, then turned to Dan and whispered, "You're not supposed to be up here." Dan stepped back. The alarm rang again, this time closer. The lights dimmed. Then something stranger happened. A tall figure, thin, dressed in a faded red jacket with a clipboard, appeared at the far end of the hallway. They walked slowly, checking each student, making small notes. Dan ducked behind a row of lockers, heart racing. The figure paused at one child, bent low, and placed a red tag on the child's wrist, then continued. Dan peeked around the corner. The clipboard had a list, and he saw his own name again. Checked off. He tried to turn away, but the boy beside him whispered again, this time without blinking. "You were down there, weren't you?" Dan couldn't respond. The boy smiled sadly. That means you're next. And the lights went out again. The red tags matched the dates in the notebook. Darkness swallowed the hallway again, but this time it wasn't empty. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor like something old had awakened beneath the tiles. Dan pressed himself against the lockers, notebook still clutched in his hand, heart pounding so loud he swore it echoed off the walls. He opened the notebook once more, flicking back through the pages by flashlight. Each name, each date, each shoe size. They weren't just records. They were selections, assignments, rituals. And now, every student he had just seen in the hallway was listed. But next to each name, now written in red ink, was a tag number. He found Gwen's entry. Gwen Rossner, size 6, April 19th, 1973. Tag 004, then Taunus. Taunus Keys, size 7, April 19th, 1973. Tag 005, then his, Dan Riggins. Size 11, today. Tag 016. The tags on the children's wrists matched the numbers in the book. This wasn't coincidence. It was a system. The figure in the red jacket, the one with the clipboard, wasn't just checking attendance. It was conducting an inventory. And Dan had been cataloged. He bolted down the corridor, passing through the haze of flickering lights and shadows. At the end of the hallway, he turned the corner sharply and came to a dead stop. Every classroom door was open. Every single one. Inside, he saw the same thing repeated like a glitch in reality. Desks, old chalkboards with names, shoes neatly stacked in pyramids on each teacher's desk. No students. Only faint outlines where they should have been. And in the center of the first room, a red tag hanging in the air, floating, turning slowly as if suspended by invisible thread. It bore the number 016. Dan staggered backward, tripping over a chair. The tag dropped, landed at his feet. He picked it up and felt it burn into his palm like dry ice. From the hallway came footsteps again, not hurried, measured. The red-coated figure, closer now. Dan tucked the tag into his pocket and ran toward the staircase leading to the second floor. The door was locked. He slammed against it once, twice. It opened on the third try. He ascended into deeper silence. But in that silence, the voices began. Soft, children whispering, calling names, and one of them whispered his. Not from memory, from below, from the locker room, from the basement. The whispering was coming through the vents. Dan moved through the second floor with cautious steps, every footfall muffled by layers of dust that had long settled over the linoleum. The rooms up here were colder, darker. The windows were boarded from the inside, allowing only faint lines of light to bleed through the cracks. He passed classrooms with desks stacked in unnatural patterns, chairs hanging upside down from the ceiling, like something had inverted the entire room. Then he heard it again. A whisper, faint, garbled, his name. Dan. He froze. The sound didn't come from behind a door. It came from above, the vent. A rectangular grate sat loosely in the ceiling corner, slightly ajar, as if someone had tried to push it open from the inside. Dan climbed onto a desk and pressed his ear to it. What he heard was not a voice. It was dozens, all whispering at once. A chorus of names, dates, shoe sizes, sobs, laughter, then silence, then a single clear whisper that cut through everything else. We were told to stay quiet. Dan recoiled, stumbled down, and stared up at the vent. A metal was trembling, not from airflow, from movement. Someone was crawling through the ducts. The whispers followed him as he moved through the halls. The voices never shouted, never rose above a hush, but they persisted, threading into his thoughts, like radio signals from another time. In one classroom, he found an old intercom panel, It clicked on by itself. A voice, faint, dusty, familiar, came through. April 19th, 1973. Emergency drill in progress. Please follow your assigned tag. Do not speak. Do not run. Do not listen. Dan yanked the cord from the wall. The voice kept speaking. Another whisper in the hallway vents. He opened his notebook and began matching the tag numbers with the vents closest to where the shoes had appeared. The pattern was clear now. Each red tag matched a name. Each name matched a room. Each room had a vent. And the vents were their voices. The missing weren't gone. They were still speaking, still trapped, still trying to finish something they never got to say. Dan's own name echoed again, this time closer, whispered not by a child, but by an older voice, his father's. Daniel. Dan dropped the notebook. His father had died 10 years ago. The voice knew things only his father would know. Dan staggered backward, eyes locked on the vent above him. The voice had faded, but not before it whispered something only one person could have known. Daniel, don't forget the old pine key in her coat pocket. That key had been his secret since he was 12. A small rusted thing his father had given him before passing, telling him it opened nothing, but was meant to be held when he was afraid. Dan hadn't told anyone, not his mother, not Gwen, not even his therapist. He reached into his jacket with trembling fingers. The key was still there. The cold metal burned against his palm. The whispers returned, softer now, no longer calling his name, but repeating a question. Where does the key go? Dan backed away from the vent and into the hallway, only to see the emergency lights flicker again. But something new had been activated. Small red arrows, glowing faintly on the floor, began to pulse, leading away from the classrooms and toward the east wing. He followed them. The whispers grew quieter with each step, replaced by another sound, a low, rhythmic knocking. Not mechanical, not electrical, human. Someone was knocking behind a door. The arrows ended in front of an unmarked steel hatch embedded in the wall between two trophy cases. Don had never seen it before, and he had walked this hallway 100 times as a kid. The door had no handle, only a single keyhole, and beside it, faint lettering worn by time, authorized for tag holders only. He took out the pine key. It fit. He hesitated, then turned it. The lock clicked, but the door didn't open outward. It fell inward. Beyond it was not a room. It was a stairwell, descending deep underground, far deeper than the basement had ever gone. A gust of warm, stagnant air hit his face, carrying with it a familiar scent. Old books, sawdust, and his father's cologne. He descended. Each step echoed louder than the last, as if the walls around him were listening. At the bottom, he reached a landing. A metal door stood before him. On it, dozens of red tags hung like wind chimes. He stepped closer. Each tag had a name and a date, but one stood out. Daniel Riggins, April 19th, 2023. Below it, scratched into the metal, were words he recognized immediately. It was the same handwriting from his father's journals. If you're reading this, you are never supposed to come back. The room was built before the school existed. Dan stared at the message on the door, the etched words pulling at something deep in his memory. His father had never mentioned this place, yet the handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, slightly slanted, with that same odd flourish on the capital R he always used when signing birthday cards. He reached for the door handle, hesitant. The metal was warm to the touch. It creaked open with surprising ease, revealing a vast chamber that defied logic. The walls were made of stone, old and crumbling, more fitting for a cave than a school. Moss clung to the edges, and narrow roots hung from the ceiling like veins. This place had been here long before the school. Before the town, the air was thick with dust and memory. Lining the walls were shelves stacked with VHS tapes, neatly labeled in the same red ink as the tags. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each labeled with a name and a date. Dan walked down the narrow aisle, scanning the titles. Some were students he remembered, kids who vanished without explanation. Others were unfamiliar, dated decades before the school even opened. Then he saw it. Daniel Riggins, April 19, 2023. The tape was already loaded into a player sitting atop a pedestal in the center of the room, connected to an old CRT monitor. The screen was off, but the second he stepped into the circle surrounding it, the monitor crackled to life. Static, then video. It was him, standing in the hallway outside the library. From 15 minutes ago, he watched himself walk. He watched himself find the notebook. He watched himself descend into the basement. And now, he was watching himself in real time, standing in front of the screen. Then the camera angle changed. It was now looking down on him from above. Not from a ceiling camera, from the vent. The whispers returned. But they weren't voices anymore. They were breaths. Long, slow, deliberate inhales. Something was watching him watch himself. Dan turned off the screen. Silence. He turned back toward the door, but it had sealed shut behind him. He ran to it, slammed his fist against the metal. It didn't budge. Then, one by one, the VHS tapes began to eject themselves from the shelves and fall to the floor, not randomly, in order creating a path leading to a second door. A smaller one, child-sized. Etched into it was the outline of a single shoe. Size 11, his size. He didn't want to open it. But behind him, the tape rewound by itself and began playing again. This time, it showed something else. Not Dan, but a girl, crying, wearing one shoe and holding the other. She was holding the shoe he found in the locker. Dan stepped closer to the screen, unable to look away. The image flickered, but the girl was unmistakable. Her hair was tangled, her face pale and streaked with dirt, but it was her eyes that stopped him. Wide, glassy, but aware, like she had been crying for hours or years. She sat in the corner of a room Dan didn't recognize. The walls were white, almost glowing, and the floor was lined with old tiles that looked like hospital linoleum. In her hands, she cradled a single worn shoe, the same one Dan had found in the sealed locker. The camera slowly zoomed in on her, and though her mouth didn't move, her voice rang out from the speakers, not through sound, but through thought. A transmission not meant for ears. "You found it." Dan staggered back. The voice was inside his mind, not like the whispers before. This was direct, personal. "You opened what should have stayed closed." She lifted her head and stared directly at the lens. No one believed me, not even him. The screen split. On one side, her. On the other, a new video began to play. It was the principal's office. From 1973. A man, tall, lean, and nervous, paced behind the desk. Papers scattered everywhere. Police stood in the corner, and across from them, a mother, crying, pleading. She didn't run away, the mother said. The principal shook his head. "We've searched everything. The building, the grounds. There's no sign of her," the officer added. "Kids go missing sometimes. Maybe she left something behind, but we have no leads. No witnesses." On the desk was the same shoe, and a tag, red, unlabeled. The mother pointed at it. She would never leave without both. A scene cut. Back to the girl, now standing. Behind her, a door. The same child-sized door Dan now faced in the chamber. She whispered again. "They thought we imagined it, but we never left. We're still here, still waiting." Dan turned from the screen to the small door in the stone wall. It creaked open on its own. Darkness spilled out, thicker than shadow, as if the light itself refused to enter. From inside, a faint hum, like electricity, like breathing, like memory. Dan reached into his pocket and felt the pine key again, but it didn't feel like metal anymore. It pulsed, alive, calling him forward. He stepped into the doorway, and the door closed behind him. The final tape was already playing. The room he entered was not a room at all. It was circular, endless, and impossible. The walls curved in all directions, lined not with bricks or cement, but with hundreds of television screens. Each one flickered silently, showing memories that were not his. Different children, different years, all of them inside the school, all of them walking hallways that seemed familiar until they weren't. In the center of the chamber was a chair, facing a single large screen, and on that screen, a tape had already begun. Dan approached it slowly. The image on the screen showed a boy, maybe 7 years old, running down the school hallway. He tripped, got up, smiled. Behind him, a voice called out, "Daniel, wake up." It was his father's voice. Dan's knees buckled. This was real. This was his first day at school. He had forgotten this memory, but here it was, perfectly preserved. The tape fast-forwarded. Each scene sped by. Every year he spent there. Every face he passed. Gwen, teachers, that old janitor with the missing thumb. Every moment recorded, until it reached today. Dan arriving. Dan finding the note. Dan going below. The final scene froze. Dan in the center of this very room, watching the screen. The screen within the screen turned black, and a new image appeared, not of him, but of the girl. She was older now, barely, still dressed in the same torn clothes, but her eyes had changed, sharper, angry, awake. She looked directly into the camera, directly at Dan. They think we're stories, ghosts, but we're records, footage. We're memory-made film. Dan stepped back, but her voice continued. None of us left. They didn't let us. They filed us away, one by one, tape by tape. Behind Dan, the televisions on the walls changed. Every single screen now showed a name, all of them red-tagged. And on every screen, the face of a missing child. Then his own, Daniel Riggins. April 19th, 2023. The girl said one last thing. They'll file you too, unless you show them, unless you let them see. The walls groaned. The screens shattered. But instead of glass, they dissolved into dust, revealing windows. Dozens of them, looking out into classrooms, into hallways, into the school itself. Dan could see everything, and they could see him. He reached for the pine key. It wasn't in his pocket anymore. It was on the floor in front of the chair. He picked it up, placed it into the slot beneath the main screen, turned it, and the world shifted. The room collapsed into white. The air turned cold. The school's fire alarms began to blare. And above ground, teachers and students watched as televisions in classrooms turned on, all of them playing the same footage. The tapes had been released. The stories were out, and Dan? Dan was no longer in the footage. Because he had never left. Because now he was the one behind the camera, watching, waiting, recording the next tape to be filed, forever.